Welcome everybody, Brett Rice with Core Vision Financial Group again, here with another episode of our Financial Topics podcast. Today I'll be speaking with Beau Browning as we talk about some personal finance, websites, blogs, books, different topics along personal finance, some of our personal favorites and some we think or recommend, that people read. So Beau, why don't you take a second? I know most people know who you are and you're a pretty familiar face around here, but go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of give an intro of what we're going to talk about today.
Thanks, Brett. I appreciate the time. I'm Beau Browning, partner here at the firm. Today we're going to talk about some personal finance books, documentaries. We've also got a couple of interesting podcasts for people to follow. We just thought providing clients, investors, with some resources that aren't us as talking heads, but are good personal finance books, especially maybe even for beginners, but easy reads, easy listens. Also, we'll talk about a docuseries that just came out on Netflix over the last 12 months. So, that's where we're at.
Okay, so as we get started on this topic, Beau, let's just talk about what's, when you go back, is there a book, something that you read a long time ago that you were like, oh, this is a, personal finance book that I think you took something away from that you were like, oh, this, maybe changed your opinion or helped form an opinion on something?
Yeah, actually the first book that I read regarding personal finance was recommended to me by another person in the industry called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert, I'm going to butcher the last name, but I think it's like Kiyosaki or something like that. He's from Hawaii. It was a great, really memoir written by him in his years of his young childhood and learning the differences between what makes a person, those decisions that make a person ultimately financially independent or not financially independent. It's eye-opening because there are just a few steps that people can take to put themselves in the right position that later on in life they don't have to worry what they might spend at the grocery store. They're not living paycheck to paycheck. They've opened a new world of financial independence that allows them to breathe a little easier, worry a little less. And he kind of just details what separates people and basically the decisions that separate those people from becoming financially independent from the ones that don't. And we do have a problem of that in this country. I would say it's probably a 50-50 split between people that are in a comfortable spot financially and people that are not in a comfortable spot financially. And a lot of times it doesn't boil down to how much somebody makes, rather it is the decisions they make with the money that they do have. And so everybody can get there and has the ability to. And this is a good jumping off point for this video because we're really trying to provide as much financial literacy out there in the public as possible. And some of the books and things that we'll mention are good resources for that.
Yeah, that Rich Dad, Poor Dad comes up on almost every list of financial, personal finance books. When you start doing research on it, that book's on every list. Doing research for this podcast, talking about personal finance books, there's a ton of books out there that people can read. And I think that one of the things people need to do is just invest some time in that and find some books. There are going to be books that where different parts of it, stick with you. And so my personal opinion is you need to read a bunch of different books because you're going to take away a little bit from, Kiyosaki or Carl Richards or some of those guys. Each one's going to have a little thing that's going to stick in your head, and that's going to be the thing that you're like, oh, this is how I can do that. And I agree with you. I think when you read these books, you hear stories of people who, had jobs and have managed to save millions of dollars and change their life, but they didn't have a high income, but they were able to use that job and make some investment decisions that 35, 40 years down the road really paid off.
Brett, you mentioned like social media. We obviously, it's a part of our lives every day. There's people that you follow, influencers in the financial industry. Obviously, you and I follow a lot of those people. A couple of them being Morgan Housel, another one being Carl Richards. That's what you mentioned.
Sure.
They've both written a book. Morgan Housel wrote a book on psychology of money. What's great about that is it also breaks down decision-making processes that all of us face, that most of us have a conflict with, and whether we choose path A or path B does have a significant different outcome in that financial independence realm later in life. He dives even deeper in that than Robert Kiyosaki. And if somebody is looking to understand why we make the decisions that we make and what we can do to kind of curb that maybe bad behavior and turn it into good behavior financially, that's a great book. Carl Richards, Carl is the guy that does doodles, essentially. He does these little sketches. A lot of them pertain to finance, but most of them pertain to just life in general or business. Anyone can take something away from Carl. He's a great follow on social media, but he wrote a book called The One Page Financial Plan. Has a lot of these sketches, doodles in it, and they're fun to see what the meaning behind some of those are. Most of them are self-explanatory, and it's kind of crazy to see other financial advisors actually put a calendar up of those. I think you have one. I've seen pictures on people's walls when I've Zoomed with them before. So they have big impact, such a small thing. So again, he's a great follow. I would encourage that on Twitter or Instagram. Carl Richards is his name. And it really, for me, those are like life lessons of how to have work-life balance is probably his main motivating factor there.
Also, Carl Richards, Behavior Gap is a book he wrote that I've read that I really, really enjoyed and took a lot away from. That's actually why I bought the calendar you referenced. Is you see those sketches and you're like, that's how you visualize what I'm trying to say to people.
Yeah.
Is you get these little easy sketches that he's done. He's been doing them for like 20 years for, I think it's like the New York Times, I think it is. For a very long time, and that just really simplifies the behaviors that successful investors and people who have this great work-life balance have created and use to say, hey, this is how I make these decisions.
It's very clear that the guy is not an artist. That's not his first what do I want to say, talent, but it's super impactful. A couple of things, Brett, I wanted to ask you are in reference to podcasts. I know I take some time when I'm in the car, getting some windshield time to listen to some podcasts. But you have also studied up, especially on the financial world, with a couple of them. So why don't you share with us couple of social media influencers, investors, guys that have big names in our industry that you follow and enjoy those podcasts?
So I'm a big fan, and I spend a lot of time watching all the podcasts from Josh Brown, Michael Batnick, Ben Carlson, the Ritholtz Wealth guys. They do a podcast called The Compound, where Josh Brown and Michael Batnick interview financial advisors and people in the financial world to talk about just a broad scope of different financial topics and help kind of shed some light on what they think is going on with those markets. And then Michael Batnick and Ben Carlson do one called Animal Spirits, where it's a back and forth. They throw out a topic and they just discuss it. And I think for me, that's somewhere to get somebody else's opinion on something you're interested in. You get a little bit of education on some background. They give you resources. They use resources from people all over the financial industry. somebody we've had on the show, Ryan Dietrich, they quote him on there all the time. So I like that, because that's somebody Beau and I talked to, probably 8 or 9 months ago. Beau and I, did a Zoom with Ryan Dietrich, and then now he's being talked to on these podcasts. They're using his resources all the time. So I think that's a nice little tie in there for us, because I'm like, oh, I know, we've talked to Ryan. So yeah, and I think for me, when I was doing it, I just kept an open mind on, I didn't go in saying, hey, I only want to listen to, financial guys that want to talk about personal finance. I've listened to, I'll say, hundreds of financial podcasts, just trying to find people that, I like listening to them. I enjoy listening to people who have a different perspective on stuff than I do, to figure out, okay, why do they think that way, or why are they in favor of investing in this versus, how I may feel about a certain investment. So I really enjoy that, is trying to, just educate yourself on why people make some of the decisions that they make. So keeping an open mind on that, because there are literally hundreds, if not thousands of podcasts out there on personal finance and investing. And so you really need to find somebody that, you like listening to them, you can understand where they're talking about, and they're knowledgeable enough about the subject that they can get deep enough into it that you can be like, okay, this person knows what they're talking about, and they're not just, talking about a subject that they're, somewhat familiar with. And you may have to listen to a bunch of different people to get that perspective, I think. So,
yeah.
So,
yeah. And I would say the overall arching theme, a lot of times when we're talking to individual investors, is saving first, spending second. And when you save, invest often, and don't let emotions get in the way. That's kind of the second lesson there.
Oh, absolutely.
Save first, don't let emotions get in the way. If you want to boil it down to those two things, that have differentiated successful investors from the ones that are not so successful.
We've not talked about this before, but obviously Dave Ramsey's on all these lists, right?
Yes.
His Total Money Makeover. I went through the class a long time ago, and I think it had a huge impact on how I budgeted. I mean, there are things I don't agree with in Dave Ramsey, but, the envelope system and making sure, like Beau just said, paying yourself first, doing some of those things, an emergency fund. There are a few things in there that I think really changed my personal financial life by saying, earmark these monies and put them, save every month for, all of these different things. And I think that made a huge impact for me, because when I heard that, I was like, I've never, ever thought about doing it that way. And I just think that was a huge impact. And that's why I suggest you listen to a bunch of different people. I don't know that any one person out there has all the answers for everything, right? And it's going to work for every single person. But educating yourself on all of the information that's out there, including, stuff you may disagree with, so you can educate yourself on, okay, this is why I'm going to choose not to do that.
It's a good point about Dave. And Dave hammers home finding a financial advisor. He is big on paying off debt first, but he also doesn't want people to forget the investing side, and requests really more of them to find a financial advisor, someone that they can trust to help guide them along that path, in both, whether it might be, protection strategies with life insurance or something, and investment strategies for the future, college savings, retirement plans, that kind of thing. So Dave's a good industry partner.
Yeah, I agree. I think he catches a lot of heat a lot of times because he does shift one side, like on certain topics he's like, cut and dry, and I don't necessarily agree with all those, but.
Well, and you had mentioned listening to a lot of different people. We also have to be a little bit careful when we are listening to, whether it be radio, podcasts. There is advertising dollars. Those go around. It's not like financial companies haven't weaseled their way into those podcasts and commercials, documentaries, or these radio shows, and that can also drive that that personality that is talking to you to say one thing when they may not even fully believe it. So you have to be a little careful in deciphering that information, because it could be motivated by something else. Yeah. I'm not saying everything, and by and large, most things are not driven that way. It's not how much you earn or spend, it's how much you save.
How you invest.
And how you invest. That's a good point. To switch gears a little bit to kind of something that it's been around for a long time, but has really taken off in recent years, in focusing on the mindset. Okay, there's mindset coaches out there now. I've actually had experience with a mindset coach. But there was a book written back in 1939 by Napoleon Hill, very similar to Rhonda Byrne's The Secret. The Secret was all about, if you dream about it, think about it, eventually it'll become yours. It'll come to fruition, right? Visualization. Napoleon Hill is saying the same thing, only with money or wealth, financial independence, whatever you want that to be. His book is called Think and Grow Rich. But what he is saying is, if every day you have a thought about enhancing the financial lifestyle of your family, or maybe it's an object, maybe you're wanting to buy a boat or travel a lot, maybe you want financial independence sooner than most people have it. Whatever it might be, if you constantly think about that goal, your actions every day inherently move you toward that target without you even consciously sometimes thinking about it. It's very subconscious driven. And that's kind of a fun book to read if you believe in that kind of thing, that if you can almost will it to happen through your powerful mind, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, right. That's one thing. A lot of these books, when you start reading them, it's like it has to become a focus, right? If you want to, become something, you have to think that way and make sure that your decisions are helping guide you in that direction. You can't be like, oh, I want to be this successful person, and then not do all the things that it takes to be successful,
right?
And then sit there and try to figure out, why was I not successful,
right?
So yeah, I 100% agree with that. I've never used a coach, but I've talked about doing it a couple of times. So I think that's something in the future I'd like to do, to have somebody help me focus on some stuff like that.
Absolutely. It was like, it was a unique experience, using some even breathing techniques, but visualizing a future self. What's funny is watching a docuseries last night from Netflix called Money Explained. They have a retirement episode in that docuseries, and the very first person they interview talks about how people almost can't or don't prefer to visualize themselves 10 years down the road. Like, the aging process is unappealing for people to visualize, and thus it causes a lot of times actually stress on finances, because people don't live for the future self, they live for the here and now, right? We all have fallen prey to that at times in our lives, and some more than others. But that docuseries goes through explanations of, I think credit cards is an episode. There's an episode on gambling, student loans. There's some great content there, and for the most part, they do a good job of being objective about that information and telling you, what are the facts about what is going on in society behind some of these things that have led to detrimental financial situations like credit cards or student loans. Not necessarily providing a fix for that. Some people give their opinion on it, but what is happening and how you can avoid some of the pitfalls. They do give you that.
Again, so, I think that goes back to the topic we were talking about. Just educate yourself.
Yes.
Watch, read, listen to really as much stuff as you can, so you can understand hey, what are the risks, the pitfalls of student loans, of gambling, of credit cards? Yeah, I've watched some of those episodes as well, and I think that it's a great place to start to get people interested, give them a basic understanding, and then kind of set them on their path of, okay, now go educate yourself on what of these strategies best fits you, and how can you avoid some of the pitfalls with them.
Yeah, and I did want to mention, Brett, that we had just put out an article on all of these books, podcasts, this docu-series that is on our website, so you can find that content. What's the tab that it's under? Underneath resources and blogs. So if you're curious and you don't want to rewind this podcast, you could at least go on the website and say, oh, I'd like to listen to that, or I'd like to read that. That information is there.
And I think that's a great segue to what our favorite blogs are. So I read a couple of blogs. Irrelevant Investor, Michael Batnick. Again, I watch him on podcasts and I read his blogs. I really like his perspective and his take on things. Of Dollars and Data, I'm going to destroy his name, Maguli. He is also a Ritholtz guy, but he's all about the technical analysis and the data of all this stuff. I like reading his blogs. They get pretty deep and they get pretty, into the weeds on some topics, but I think it's great if you're interested in that. And then locally, a guy here in Fishers, Indiana, Justin Castelli, he has a blog on all about your Benjamins that I really like. I like his perspective on that stuff as well. He's, kind of bring things down to a pretty basic level to help people understand stuff. So what about non-financial related podcasts or books or blogs or anything like that?
All right, I'll give you a favorite book and favorite movie. Actually, might go with two. I was thinking about this last night. Favorite book is Lord of the Flies. It has been since I was 12 or 13 when I first read it. I absolutely love that book. The survival aspect, the kind of it brings a whole new level when it's considering that you have kids on an island and not adults, which is where most of those stories go. But it's relatable nonetheless, which is pretty cool. Secondly, on the movie front, I love Silence of the Lambs, more so because of the performance of Anthony Hopkins. He is my favorite all time. Love that guy. And then second would be Shawshank Redemption. It's just an awesome movie. There's so many things, really different stories intertwined going on at the same time. But the relationships that those guys developed inside of a penitentiary is that it ultimately doesn't translate to real world as it did inside. And I think it gives perspective to that world or that life. And it just, I don't know, love that movie. I know you and I have talked about it. It's a great movie.
Yeah, I also love Shawshank Redemption. It's such a great movie. I'd say if I had to choose movies, though, I'm probably not going Silence of the Lambs and those. I'm probably more, Tommy Boy. Those. I love all those Chris Farley movies. I'm a Happy Gilmore guy. And, those type of movies. I like to laugh.
Anything with Will Ferrell? Step Brothers? Which I quote in here frequently.
Of course, Step Brothers has got to be up there as well. But I also really like the toys from my youth that are now movies. I've really enjoyed the Transformer movies. I swear, anytime I walk across one or I come across one on the TV, I'll stop and watch it. I freaking love the Transformer movies, and I don't know why. I know why. I played with those toys as kids, and to take them from those physical toys into the movies to all the things you dreamt they could do, I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
I like the G.I. Joe movies. Star Wars, I'm a huge Star Wars guy. I love to watch all of those movies. Even the terrible ones.
I, in fact, watched maybe 6 of the 9 recently of Star Wars. Love Star Wars, love Lord of the Rings, any of those where they're epic you know.
Books. Favorite book, and I've really spent some time thinking about this. There was a book I read a long time ago called The Celestine Prophecy. It's a crazy book that I read probably in my early 20s that it really changed the way I looked at a lot of stuff and how I spent time and how I relaxed and stuff like that. But it's kind of a crazy, far out book. But I'm trying to think what else. I really liked Behavior Gap a lot. I liked.
Okay, we can't get off this video without mentioning the podcast of all podcasts, Joe Rogan's podcast. Highly recommend it. He just has an absolute wide variety of people on his podcast. Now, they're extremely long, 3 hours sometimes. Yeah. Most of them are 3 hours. Yeah. And I get into them sometimes. I won't listen to the whole thing. If I'm kind of not following along anymore, I'll pick another one. But he's got a lot of scientists or industry leaders from all over the place, whether it be healthcare to, you know, I was on there the other day or listening to a guy talk about bear grease, you know, and learning about how it used to actually be a commodity. I mean, things like that. He brings interesting people on there, and you really learn a lot of different things. So a general wealth of knowledge, I would say.
Try to pick one episode as your favorite from Joe Rogan.
Oh man, I know you and I talk about Neil deGrasse Tyson, which
I love those.
He is awesome. Elon Musk is a good listen as well.
I think Kevin Hart. There's the first time I think Kevin Hart was on Joe Rogan, an absolutely inspirational podcast.
Yeah.
I remember I listened to it twice. It's like 3 hours long, and I've listened to it, you know, multiple times, just because he sits in there and he's just like of the mindset of, why can't I do that? Why, you know, hey, people are going to tell me I'm a comedian. I can't own real estate. I can't start a book publishing company. I can't, you know, it's like, why not? Why not me? Why can't I do that?
I enjoyed the McConaughey one.
What about Goggins?
David Goggins.
Goggins on there,
hero.
Incredible. I mean, incredible. And you talked about Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yep.
I mean, stuff that you just can't wrap your head around some of the stuff he talks about.
Yep.
Very awesome podcast. We wouldn't mind hearing some feedback from you guys. You know, what are your favorite podcasts, your favorite books, you know, blogs, anything like that? You know, any feedback you want to give us on that, you know, we'd think it'd be great. Any closing words, Beau? Anything you want to say before we shut this down?
I really do hope that people comment, tell us the content that you follow, and it doesn't have to be finance. We'd be excited to hear that. But, you know, thanks for having me. I know this has been a little bit more of a light discussion, kind of fun, change of pace from just talking about industry basics and investments and those types of things that can get mundane. So this has been fun. Hope everybody enjoys it.
Yeah, again, thanks for spending some time with us. We appreciate it. And any questions, comments, concerns, reach out to us. Let us know. Our social media information will be at the end of this video. We're both, you know, out there on all social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. Reach out. Let us know what you think. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.